and welcome to another update on our low spend challenge. We've been doing this challenge for almost a year now, and so I've really been starting to reflect on how it's gone so far and whether or not we're going to continue in the new year. If you're new here, hi, welcome. My name is Kathy, and my husband and I have been doing this low spend challenge since the beginning of the year because we've been trying to save money after the birth of our daughter. So at the beginning of the year, I took a lot of unpaid leave from work to care for my daughter. And then after returning to work, we've had the added expense of daycare, as well as the unexpected expense of replacing our roof in April. So having started the low spend year at the beginning of the year, it had really helped us with saving additional towards paying for our roof. So in addition to having these added expenses, we also just wanted to be a little bit more mindful with our consumption and only purchase things that we absolutely needed. So we started this low spend challenge in order to be more mindful of our purchases so that we could save up for goals that were much more important than having things that we didn't really need. So if you've never heard of a low spend challenge or a no spend challenge, it's pretty simple. We set up rules at the beginning of things that we are okay with spending on and things that we are not okay with spending on. And things that we're only going to purchase if it's absolutely necessary, like if something breaks or runs out and it's something that we need. So of course we're going to keep paying our bills and buying our necessities, but some of the things that we aren't spending money on this year are items like home decor or additional kitchen gadgets, because we already have everything that we need right now. We're not going out to restaurants or ordering takeout, and we're not buying any clothing or personal items unless absolutely necessary. Like earlier this year, my one pair of jeans, the zipper broke, and although I could have probably fixed the zipper, I decided to replace them with another pair of jeans that I found at the thrift store. We're also not purchasing any books or electronics. I get all of the books that I read from the library, either the audiobook or the ebook. And there's no electronics that we need because we replaced our phones last year and that should last us for another couple years. So as I mentioned, we are paying our bills. We have electricity and car insurance, our mortgage, some loan payments, the student loans, the car loan, and a loan to my retirement account. The other necessities that we have to pay for are internet, food, gas for our cars, any kind of maintenance on our cars, home maintenance, stuff for my 2 rabbits, and any health expenses, as well as any purchases that are absolutely necessary for our daughter, like new clothes when she grows out of them. At the beginning of the year, it was kind of hard for me to not make purchases, especially in the categories that we deemed as kind of necessary, like food. I spent a lot of additional money on groceries, buying some things like junk food that we didn't really need. But I think a lot of that was linked to me being home a lot. So when I was taking unpaid leave, I was home every single day with my daughter. And so for something to do, we would go to the grocery store and just look around and buy anything that was on sale. We would go to the discount grocery store, which had really good deals, like 90% off of stuff, but we would buy things that we didn't actually need, like cookies or ice cream. So these are not things that I typically buy from our grocery store, and so they're not things that we absolutely need, but they were on such good deals and I would buy them and justify it because our grocery spending was not a no spend category. So as I've gone back to work, I've gotten a little bit better with that because I actually haven't been able to get to the grocery store at all. Most of the time my husband's going, so I'm not going just to browse and buy things on sale. So I've gotten a little bit better with spending at the grocery store. However, my husband still has a little bit of difficulty in that area. So now I'm just going to jump into a review of our spending for the past 2 months. In general, we've spent a lot more these past 2 months than we did previously because we had a lot of expenses come up that we weren't really anticipating. So first of all, for car and gas, we ended up spending $379.64, and most of that was actually for my car registration. I have to renew my tags every 2 years, and that was $221, which was, I guess I should have known that the registration was coming up, but I didn't expect it to be that much. I think 2 years ago it was under $200 to renew the tags for 2 years. But this year it was a little bit more. Also, we spent a little bit more on gas because we traveled to Ohio at the beginning of September, and so we had to buy 2 tanks of gas, one for the ride there and one for the ride back. So we spent a little bit more on gas these past 2 months. So for comparison, in June and July, we only spent $194.91 on car and gas. So next we have groceries, which is my big problem area, as I mentioned earlier. And these past 2 months, we spent a lot more than the prior 2 months. But a big part of that was we purchased a bulk order of groceries through Azure Standard. So we got a couple 100 pounds of dried beans and grains and flour and stuff. Those are things that we use almost daily for our meals, and buying them in bulk was much more cost effective than buying from our local grocery store. So hopefully it will save us money in the long run. But in these past 2 months, we ended up spending $841.04 on groceries. And that's almost $200 more than we had spent in the previous 2 months. We're still going out and making lots of small purchases at the grocery store, picking up a few vegetables that we need last minute for a meal. And even though it's only about $15 to $20 a trip, that adds up when you're going to the grocery store 10 times a month. We're still mostly sticking to our grocery budget though. I think I budget usually under $400 a month for the 3 of us, and we're usually pretty much under that. Now moving on to home maintenance, we ended up buying a washing machine at the beginning of September on a Labor Day sale because our current washer and dryer break almost constantly. My husband is always fixing them. Plus, they don't really work very well. They were pretty old. I think they were bought used by the previous owner of the house. So they weren't very good. My husband fixed them a few times, and he was tired of fixing them and tired of his clothes smelling stinky after going through the wash. So we replaced our washer with a combo washer dryer at the beginning of September. And to set that up, we needed some additional supplies, and then we also bought a water filtration system to reduce the sediment in our water so that we could protect the washer from any potential future damage due to sediment in the water. It also protect all of our other appliances. And so for the past 2 months in home, we spent $2,232.25, which is more than 4 times as much as we spent in the previous 2 months. So hopefully in the rest of the year, we shouldn't have much more spending in home. Although I always say that and then some big expense comes up. So at least we have a sinking fund for our home maintenance and an emergency fund as well. So moving on to baby, this is stuff for my daughter. And usually we don't spend very much in this category because there's not much that she needs. She's breastfed and has cloth diapers. So other than buying new clothes for her, we usually don't spend really anything. She has a cousin where we also get some clothes and toys, although she's a couple years older. And my uh, my sister-in-law had mostly given away a lot of her stuff before we found out about my daughter. So she gets some stuff from her cousin, but it's not a lot. So usually we're spending about $30 a month on her for new clothes from the thrift store and maybe some things that she needs for daycare, which isn't very much usually. But this past month, we had another doctor bill come in from her birth. And so I think this was the hospital bill. We had paid for all of the doctors. And we're on a high deductible healthcare plan. So basically, all of the expenses from her birth we had to pay out of pocket. And so we had another bill come in that was like almost $700. So I put that in the baby sinking fund just because I had a lot more in her sinking fund than I had in health, although it could have been a health expense as well. But in these past 2 months, we spent $687.97 on our daughter. And now moving on to pets. I mentioned I have 2 rabbits, and they're pretty low maintenance. I buy them food and hay and pellets for their litter box and fresh greens for them to eat. And they don't eat too terribly much, so there's not much that they need very frequently. But then once a year they go to the vet, and that's been in January, and they get their annual vaccines and a checkup. But these past 2 months, we ended up buying them food and pellets for their litter box and spent $55.51. In these past 2 months, we've also had much more spending in the health category. Since my daughter's at daycare, she's actually been sick constantly since like the last week of August from the kids at daycare. And it's like just as soon as she started getting better, all the kids, like their siblings, went back to school, and then she got sick again. So we've been spending a lot on health these past 2 months because when she gets sick, we get sick. So we bought some cough medicine and stuff, and also had to take her to the doctor to get her some antibiotics. So in these past 2 months, we've spent $157.61 on health. And most of that I'll be using my FSA for, which is my pre-tax health savings account. But I can only use it for health expenses this year and not like her doctor bill from last year. So I think I have a little more than $100 left to spend in that this year, or else I lose it. So we'll probably be making some more health purchases before the end of the year, even if they're not things like absolutely necessary, like stocking up on Tylenol, maybe more cold medicine. So moving on to one of our low spend categories, which is gifts and donations. This is only for purchasing gifts for other people or making donations. Currently, my husband and I aren't really buying gifts for each other because of our low spend year, and we're not buying anything for our daughter either, even though she just had her birthday. She's too young to really know about receiving gifts. So these past 2 months, we only spent $20 in gifts and donations. And then another one of our low spend categories is restaurants. We've actually been really good about this category this year. We haven't really gone out at all. I think a couple of times I got like chips from Chipotle because they were giving me bonus points and free things. So I ended up like buying chips and getting free guacamole or something. So um, we haven't really spent very much in restaurants. I think last month I went out to lunch with my colleagues and spent $9.53. But overall, we're doing really good with this category. And then our last two low spend categories we did excellent on because we didn't spend anything. So that was clothing and personal and travel and entertainment. So even though we did some traveling, it was just to visit family. And so we didn't have to pay for anything while we were there. And then no purchases in clothing and personal. I think I mentioned buying those jeans, but I think that was this last month. I think that was in August, and they were $3, I think. And I think I just categorized them under baby since most of the things that I bought from the thrift store were for my daughter. So I'm not like super strict with my categories. If I make a purchase that's mostly one thing, even though there's something else in it. So for example, sometimes we buy like cleaning things or like soap or something from the grocery store, and all of that ends up getting counted as groceries and not like home if it's a cleaning supplies, or personal if it's like beauty or personal care. So that was it for an update on my spending in my categories this month. As I mentioned, I think we're doing pretty well with this. It's actually pretty easy to not spend too much. As I mentioned, just groceries usually. Occasionally when we go to the thrift store, I probably buy a little bit more than I need. I buy things that I may not have picked up otherwise because they weren't absolutely necessary. But I think this challenge has really helped us with being more mindful of our consumption, which was my goal at the beginning. I didn't want to be purchasing things without really thinking it through, especially with having a new baby. Like, you're constantly bombarded with these are things that you absolutely need. You need to buy this, you need to buy that. And I've really noticed that there's really not much that we've needed to buy for her. I mean, there's not a lot of toys or things that she really needs. She has a few things, as I mentioned, from her cousins, but there's not very many toys, and a lot of the things that she likes to play with are just household things. Like, we have a lot of jars, and she just loves the lids, and she just carries them around with her all the time. So there's not many toys that we've really needed to buy for her, and she's really just happy playing with anything that she finds around the house that's safe for her. And she spends most of her time at daycare where there's an abundance of toys for her to play with. So it's not like she's not being stimulated. And I found that not having like the clutter of a ton of toys at home, a ton of items at home, has really made things a lot better. We get to spend a lot of time together, and I'm not just like constantly cleaning up and organizing a ton of toys. So this low spend challenge has really helped me maintain a minimal lifestyle with having a new baby, and I really appreciate that because I get to savor more time with my daughter. Instead of always trying to buy her new things to keep her entertained, we just spend time together playing with whatever she discovers, going out for walks, reading books together, things like that. The very simple things. And she's not overstimulated from too much stuff. And it seems like in our society, we're always being pushed to buy more stuff. It'll make our lives more simple. And I think that having less stuff has really made my life more simple. So that was an update on my low spend challenge for this year. I think we may actually continue doing this next year, maybe a little bit less strict, I think, because once we've paid off our roof at the beginning of April, we'll have a lot more income. But we don't want to be just blowing that. I think we're going to focus on paying down some of our debts. So we're still going to need to be mindful about our spending. I think in the next 2 months, we're going to need to be especially vigilant on our spending because we're entering the consumerism period with Christmas and the holidays. So we're going to be bombarded with lots of sales and pressures to buy. And so it's going to be a little bit more difficult, I think, to stick to this challenge and only buy the things that we absolutely need. I know that for my family, for the holidays, we don't buy very much because we're not purchasing anything for the adults, just the kids. And I try to be very intentional with my purchases of gifts for other people and only buy them things that they absolutely need. I don't think buying someone a gift just to get them something is really thoughtful, because if you buy them something that they don't want, then it's just one other thing that they need to figure out where to store or how to get rid of it without hurting your feelings. So I think it's really important to only buy gifts for people if it's something that they absolutely want. So oftentimes I like to make treats for people, things that they can consume instead of something that will just clutter up their space. If you're doing a low spend challenge this year or this month, let me know in the comments how it's going. And maybe you can consider doing a low spend challenge for the rest of the year and focus on not purchasing anything extra for yourself so that maybe you can gift or donate more. We are in the final stretch of our challenge, and if you're interested in seeing the final recap, then please hit subscribe because I would love to have you here to follow along. Thank you for being here.